For the respect of everything, we had a conversation before, so we're keeping her very anonymous, not bringing her name, none of the thing of the monastery, because usually I like to shout people out and give everybody the credit.
It makes some sense
makes
to people
total
though, because
sense.
it's my life and it's the way my brain works, but I don't know if it makes sense to most people.
That's all it is. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing that you should be ashamed of, or you're passionate about it. And that's why I felt like we needed to get you a mic. Have you seen other nuns that have tattoos or sisters?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Because we all have a story. So that's the reason why I come in here.
Right.
It's not, I'm not
She's
getting
a half sleeve done.
No.
You guys can't see, but I'm kidding.
I've been seeing little videos from priests talking about whether or not it's okay. Does the Bible say, since the Bible says no tattoos, what do you think about that? Yeah. So basically they're all like, listen, that was talking about like being tattooed for the reason of pagan worship, pagan idol worship.
There was an intentional reason why.
They're basically their reason. And these priests have tattoos, and they're like, basically, that we're not saying you can't get tattoos, do it, but just make sure you know what you're doing.
Some people were doing it like, again, we were talking about technology. Yeah. Some people were abusing of the markings.
Yeah.
And that was a way of doing that with malcontent. So
right, yeah. So if it's not for that, if it's it's wiser to live your life as if God existed and then die and find out he didn't exist, than to live as if God didn't exist and then to die and find out that he does.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
Oof.
My life is completely revolved around a very specific belief. If you believe in something and you believe it to be true, then you have a responsibility to at least hope and pray that others will come to the same light that you feel you've come to. If nothing else, if you haven't asked yourself what's going to happen after you die, what do I really believe is the truth? And if I don't believe there's any truth, is that true?
Before we actually officially start, this is just kind of like, I guess we can
get some background.
Let's lay it all out before we actually start. You've had quite the journey to get to where you are and forward. However long when it started to before, to who would have known, right? Who would have guessed of how things would have turned out? Yeah. But I feel like that's the intriguing part.
Okay.
Versus don't think that it's I'm not an educator, but because again, it's I don't want you to be here and people think you're representing. Right. Though, it's not like that at all. I understand the community, our own community as tattoo artists, we have that tier of the guys that first started this, right? We've seen the tattoo industry since the beginning. The community of the churches have also evolved into this whole keeping it traditional, but now they have to almost translate to a newer generation. You have to be there by heart, fully be present, not just show up.
Yeah,
not just
you're actively participating.
Right.
What's attractive to young people now, because there are a lot of people coming into the church now currently, but they're not attracted to movements and organizations and programs within the church which are trying to make things more modern.
Modern is the word, I guess.
Young people are attracted to the tradition and the beauty and the richness of the way things were done for hundreds and thousands of years. Right. It was only in the last 100 years that things started to go downhill and new ideas started to filter into the church, and we got off track in the way we present the truth that we believe. Because we tried to make it more appealing for modern people, but it didn't work, and so that's why numbers seem to be dwindling, based on what you're seeing in churches that are still implementing the new way, but in churches that are returning to old traditions, there's a lot more that's more attractive to people.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
I don't know. It's hard unless you're in it and you're seeing it from the depth of what's happening. It's hard to imagine, and so that's why I'm I have this experience, and I don't know how that's going to translate to people.
Well, no, because your experience it has quite the story though. You're given a name when you go into the monastery, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that. How should I address you?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So I can just call you sister.
You could do that. You could say Sister Mary.
Sister Mary.
A lot of people.
That's
we're
pretty.
here with. You could say we're here with Sister Mary. A lot of it traditionally, a lot of Catholic nuns are named Sister Mary something else.
Right.
Sister Mary, after the mother of Jesus.
Right.
And then they also take another name after the name of a saint, which is someone we believe to be in heaven with Jesus and Mary right now.
Okay.
So and that's for the purpose of asking that saint's special protection during
right,
this
and that's
part
like
of their
with
life.
through prayer and
It might not be the same when I go back,
Sure.
or at least it might be at first, but they might change it to something else.
So for introductory, it's an opportunity to have people kind of put everything aside. You've seen it coming out with like judgmental bias or people that whether they follow or don't, or they have a shaky journey or like steps with their faith, or are tested or are going through like a fallout or diminishing, like you mentioned, is a really good way to put it. When was it when you got in? So we have with us is Sister Mary.
Starting now?
I guess we can start it. I feel like we're good.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Sister Mary, what year was it when you went in, like into your like devotion?
When I started living the faith more seriously, or you mean like becoming a nun?
Becoming a nun.
Okay, because those are two different things. I grew up in the church, and I always was as faithful as I could, not understanding a lot of things, but being pretty certain that I was in the right place most of my life. But when I was 19, I decided to get just a little bit more serious about my faith and really started to pray more and just take my relationship with Jesus more seriously. And I was still just living a regular life, and I was thinking about pursuing marriage eventually. And it wasn't until a few years later, I think I was 24, when I finally felt the Lord calling me to give my life to Him as a religious, is what we call it. And when the title religious, that can encompass a number of different ways of living out the religious life, which is the consecrated life. Consecrated meaning set apart. So you're set apart from the world, and you decide to, you feel that you're being called by God to live a life more directly in His service, more directly devoted to Him by basically renouncing the natural right and inclination that you have towards marriage and a family, and deciding to give your life to His service in whatever way that is, whether it's going to be teaching or nursing or doing some active, beautiful work for Him in the world, like Mother Teresa, serving the poor, or serving Him through a life that's mainly dedicated to prayer. And that's what I felt Him calling me to do. So there are active religious, those who you see, like Mother Teresa, the teachers and the nurses. And then there's contemplative religious, who are more dedicated just directly to prayer of intercession for the world. So to asking the Lord to send His blessings and graces down to everyone in the world who needs them, which is all of us.
Yeah.
And so that's what I felt He was calling me to do. And I was about 25 when that happened. And
what year was that?
that was 2011. Sorry, I was 24. 2011.
2011. And so since then, you went from up to that point living in the society. The last few times you've been in here, you've mentioned the world, right? And that was very that to me, I was like, wow, you reference to everything as the world, being out back into the world. And I thought that was interesting, because I'm like thinking, well, I mean, you left at that point, you're closed off to the world.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
It's
actually called a cloister, which is a Latinization of an enclosure.
Right.
And I think clausura, I think is in Spanish, and cloître in France is the word, and so it's all associated with the idea of being enclosed.
Right.
And in a lot of traditional monasteries, there actually is a physical separation. It's called a grate or a grill, and it's like iron bars, and they can be big or small. And it's not like a jail cell, but people who aren't familiar with the life tend to associate it with a jail cell because of the iron bars. But it's meant to represent a very real separation from the world, and you're not locked in, lock and key. You're free to leave if you choose. Case in point, I'm here now.
Right.
You know, people who enter is what we call it, or decide to begin living that type of life freely of their own volition, desire to have a real separation from everything in the culture and society, or as much as possible, if not everything, because that isn't possible, but to be separated as much as is possible and reasonable, and as much as is prudent, from everything that is not directing their minds and hearts towards God, towards pursuing a greater relationship with God, and towards pursuing a life of really greater purity of heart, in order to love with greater purity, in order to make a gift of themselves to God, and for the salvation of souls, really is why you're there, for out of thanksgiving for the blessings that you've been given, and in order to live a life of prayer, silence, and work, and a life of sacrifice, because we believe that sacrifice in union, when you're uniting your intention to the intention of Christ, who gave his life on the cross for the salvation of the world, you're uniting your intentions to his intention at that moment. Then you want to pursue a life that is as pure as possible. And so there are many distractions that come in daily life, in society. Even people who are striving to live very pure lives and very good lives, there's just so many distractions. You can't escape it. It's everywhere, from the noise to your obligations, your daily obligations at work or at home, to the noise that's going on in your head, all of your thoughts, and just all the stuff that may be going on inside of you, to the images that you see that are, you may come across images that you wish you never saw on a daily basis. So there's that and many other things.
You're purifying and cleansing, right? That's what because it's what I remember. You kind of told me a little bit of the story, what attracted you to become a nun. But can you tell me about the experience when you encountered a nun, right?
Yes.
And you're just so like enlightened and motivated.
Yeah. As I said, I had been thinking for most of my young adult life about marriage and a family, and I very much wanted to be a wife and mother, and take care of a family, and raise children who would be good and holy and contributing members of society. And I was in that mindset when I went on a pilgrimage, and I was in the presence of a good number of religious sisters. They were active religious sisters, and many of them were between the ages of, I would say, 20 and 35, maybe, and also some religious priests. So a religious priest is different from your regular parish priest that most of us are familiar with. A religious priest is a priest who decides to live in community with other priests, kind of live a mixed life of prayer and service to people who are in the community, just regular people. So there were a number of religious there. So I got to spend some time with them, and especially with the nuns, just seeing how joyful. They weren't actually nuns. There's a difference between a nun and a sister. They're active sisters. A nun is someone who's enclosed in the cloister, like I have been. So these sisters, they were young, and they were beautiful, and they were so happy and so joyful. And there was something.
You were like, "What's the secret?"
Yeah, that's what it was. I looked at them, and I just saw something in their eyes, and just the way that they went about life that was so beautiful and so enticing, and just something so innocent and pure. And it was something that I realized is what I wanted, and it was something that that my heart had desired in desiring so much to be a wife and mother, and desiring to be good and to pass on goodness to others, to children. These women, these sisters, seemed to have what I wanted, and yet they had dedicated their lives solely to God and to serving His children, to God's children. And so I realized that they were in fact mothers, and they were in fact they were spouses dedicated to Christ, the bridegroom. They had found the most perfect spouse. They were spiritual mothers to many souls by giving their lives in service and in love. And I realized that that's what I deeply wanted in my heart, and that's what I felt like the Lord might be calling me to. Actually, I was pretty certain after spending some time with them that was what I had been seeking. And that was when I decided to start pursuing that.
As I understand that there's a comparison when you're a nun or like a sister, that you also carry that title as being a mother. And we can get into conversation more about it, but like your mission as far as your overall job, like a title, a reason why you're there, in essence, you're praying for the world, right? Like you said, the bride and groom, that now they consider and compare you also taking that like a motherly figure, right? So that's something where it's very, because a lot of people don't know. If you go to England, British soldiers that are standing guard, it's just more like a novelty. You go up to one of them and take a picture, and it's just, but you don't know anything that their standing beliefs are. You just know that, oh, I've seen these in like books or history, right? And it's an iconic thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say, like an icon. And you see a nun, but people don't understand what the title is and what's behind it. Not only the becoming, you have this, it's like this oath that's very deeper than like any kind of pledge. Any place where I've encountered a nun, it's never been like or like a recruiting, right? So it's not like you can go up there and they had a brochure and be like, you want to join? Right? It's not like that at all. It's more like you have to really, this is kind of be like your testimony of like, this is the proof of
your
what
life
I felt.
Your life is your testimony, really.
For sure. For you to actually take that leap. How did that conversation go with the nuns or the sisters to be like, how do I do this? Or, you know.
So we call it discernment.
Discernment. Okay.
Discernment is to kind of have a conversation back and forth within yourself, to deliberate, really, to have conversations with people who you're considering spending the rest of your life with, the community that you're considering entering. And it's a conversation, of course, between yourself and God, the Holy Spirit, to really go deep within your soul and ask, like, is this something that I want? Is this something that I'm capable of? And is this something that you want for me? And to start taking steps to figure out whether or not, this is the right kind of life. It's like dating,
Take that walk.
First there's an initial attraction, and then you have to start spending time together and asking questions and getting to know each other. So that's what the discernment process is. That's what the time of finding out, asking questions, experiencing the life a little bit. So most people, when they initially feel called to start discerning, to start thinking about it and finding out, then they'll start investigating different religious communities if they didn't feel, attracted to a specific one.
Right.
Because there's many different kinds of religious communities. There's lots of different work they do. And even the ones that are specifically dedicated to prayer, the contemplative communities, they're of many different types, and there's many different ways that they live out their life concretely. Although we all have the same fundamental beliefs, and the same core beliefs, and the same loyalty, the
mission, the goal,
the same fidelity to the teachings of the Catholic Church. That's that's where I'm coming from. This is it's a specifically Catholic thing that although there are other types of nuns, actually. There's Orthodox nuns, there's Anglican nuns.
That's what I heard, like the Orthodox, and that's when you have like certain,
it's
like
a very
your
ancient
attire.
It's an ancient way of life. And so with anything that's ancient, the way it's lived out, takes many different forms, although the fundamentals of it are the same.
Yeah.
But in modern days, there's many types of religious. So you go and you kind of test the waters of different communities and see, this might be for me, this might not be for me. This community spends this many hours in prayer, in silent prayer, or in vocal prayer. This community does this kind of work. This community does nursing, and I'm not a nurse. This community is teaching, and I'm not inclined to be a teacher. So you have to figure out, exactly where you think, your place. The core of it is that you feel called to enter into a life of total dedication to God and to His, the building up of His kingdom in whatever way He has created you to do.
Yeah.
For religious, for nuns, sisters, or priests who are religious, you do that primarily by you dedicate your life through vows. You mentioned like it's more than an oath or things like that. It's you actually take religious vows, and it's the same. We consider it on the same level as like your marriage vows.
Yeah, marriage,
So there's a moment where after a long time of discernment, after a long time of dating and figuring out whether this is the one, you make a decision that, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to this for the rest of my life. And traditionally, ancient times, there was only one vow, and that was obedience. And that encompassed also poverty and chastity and stability, which are the modern way we express our vows now. So most religious sisters and nuns take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And so you're vowing to be poor, you're vowing to relinquish, quote unquote, the world and the things of the world. So most religious, most nuns and sisters, they technically don't own anything, although they have, they may have a closet of
but no
clothes
no
and
real
shoes.
like tangible attachment.
Yes, that's the point, to take away.
It's a very monk way.
Yeah.
It's a very ancient monk way of living. So you're asking a question to a sister saying, like, you see how their demeanor, their charisma, right? And you're like I've been wanting that, or I've been missing. They have this like void or this like this magnitude of attraction towards that, and it's like I know a lot of us nowadays wish we knew how to
detach,
and also it's hard because you mentioned there's the noise and the obligations, which little problems people make them into big problems, and in reality there's like, if people were to really, I guess, just take a step back and not only live but indulge yourself with what's in front versus the facade. Right?
Be really present.
Very present. And that, that pertains to so many things. Because, think about it, since 2011?
11, that was when I felt called.
And then you recently came out for like personal reasons that you had to seek medical, right? So
I had. So typically, it's not common for someone to leave the cloister, although it does happen. But typically, once you enter, the desire, the hope is that you would stay there.
Right.
I had exceptional permission to come and spend some time outside the cloister, and to just kind of to leave off my life as a nun for some time to take care of some medical needs. Right.
That you couldn't receive in the monastery.
And usually they try to make every effort to be able to address things while you're there.
Because they do have, because there's like you mentioned, as far as jobs, you do have like nurse per se, right? Or any kind of, because you guys, we can get into the jobs, but as seeking, like for instance, if there's an illness, you guys do have.
Sure, yeah,
we're able resources.
We do, yeah.
It's not like you guys are super in a
Right, we're not like cut off from society to the fact like if you get sick, that's too bad. Like you're either gonna stay in and die, or you have to leave. It's not that.
It's not that, right? Because I want to clarify a lot of things, because it's like, well, why did this person leave? Or it's not, because it goes beyond it. A great opportunity for us to just sit and really kind of dive into a little bit of the, you know, what underlines it, but also like what it takes in the sense of like a journey and your like a true what's in your heart, like your calling, the what you felt. And so there is resources. It's not like you guys have, what I mean as far as like technology goes though, there's only what, like a landline?
We have a landline. There's a few cell phones around the convent for necessary.
They're on the pillows, okay.
Right, yeah, but not every night. Most cloistered monasteries, enclosed monasteries, they have between like 8 and maybe 100 people living in the community. So ours is somewhere in between. But I would say there's maybe 3 or 4 sisters who have to have a personal cell phone, which they like turn off between the hours of.
There's hours.
Yeah, there's hours. So if you're not, if you try to email that sister and she doesn't get back to you for like 12 hours or 2 days, like that's normal. Right. I know a religious community, a community of nuns who they didn't get back to me after like 2 months, and I was like,
you have to understand though. That's just how it is.
That's their way of life. But people regularly go out for doctor's appointments. Sisters regularly have to go out for doctor's appointments and go grocery shopping if needed or whatever. Like we can leave, but we prefer not to. Right.
I wouldn't either. Yeah. If I was there and I seen an easier, simple /
I wouldn't necessarily call it easier nor stress-free.
No, yeah. Well, I understand there's like some back, some labor. There's still like your own efforts to be put in, but
it's a different way of
a different way of living. Mm-hmm. And a lot has happened from 2011 to now. Yeah. So this is your first time you really have been away for this long, right? Mm-hmm. When you actually get to mingle with this, where the world is
today. Because when we do go out of the monastery for whatever reason, part of we follow like a rule of life. There's a couple of different little like books that we have written down. This is the way you're to conduct yourself from day to day within the community and outside the community. So, for example, there's a rule that says if you go out, normally you should go out at least with a partner and someone to accompany you.
Right.
We normally don't go out just by ourselves to grab something from the grocery store or anything like that. You normally go with someone, and when you go out, you kind of stay together.
Right.
And you don't necessarily like try to engage in unnecessary conversation. Oftentimes people come up to you and they have many questions because you're dressed you're dressed differently.
And you're very,
it's called a habit. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. So a lot of communities in the 1900 from between 1968 and like the year 2000, a lot of religious communities, they stopped wearing these traditional forms of clothing, which are really from the Middle Ages.
Right.
But we modernized them a little bit. But a lot of communities stopped wearing those. But now a lot of young communities which are starting to attract people, they are attractive because they're more traditional. And my community is like that. And so we wear the full traditional, what's called a habit. So the long veil.
That's kind of like your wedding dress, right?
It is.
Like the wedding dress it represents, you get to wear, you're wearing it every day.
And some communities actually wear a full white habit. So it's a long tunic and it's what's called a scapular. It gets thrown over. It's just something that gets thrown over your shoulders. Just a couple different pieces, but meant to invoke a certain modesty and to kind of make you a sign to anyone who would see you of a different way of life. Like you're by the way you dress, you're meant to invoke.
It's your presence and the way you're projecting.
It's meant to get to people to notice, like, oh, there's like something else. Like this person is clearly
it's quite
not.
The impression and impact.
Yeah.
You see the businessman put on the suit and tie, or like someone in the military. that it has to be, they have their rules.
There's a dignity and like a splendor. There's something that a respect, a certain respect, or even if not respect, just a recognition.
Right.
That the specific
the same way they
evoke.
can see you in your garment or in your like attire, the same way they see a soldier and say, well, thank you for your service. Thank you for your prayer. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like,
they do that.
It's both, everyone's like serving, like a police officer. Right. There's these people of even like healthcare workers, you see them in like scrubs and you may not know that maybe that's just like a school scrub.
Yeah.
They're going to school, but they're saving lives and you get a discount. It's formal attire. And you're right. It does impact different.
Yeah. There's a little sort of joke among religious sisters who are like, if you get stuck on the side of the road, your car breaks down, it doesn't take long for a couple of gentlemen to pull up and just want to help the sisters. They always want to help the sisters. Right. And it's just something very respectful because there's something about the garment, the traditional way of dressing that just invokes like people know that there's something good, not necessarily something good within each religious sister, but they're endeavoring towards, they've dedicated their lives towards something greater and higher than themselves and towards a goodness. And people recognize that, and there's something beautiful about that. Yeah,
it's pretty staple when you see it. It's recognizable, and you're able to like, you can see. So when you started this, the journey when you started having this conversation with yourself to be like, I'm gonna leap, head first and take on this walk. The challenges transitioning, because I know you had to detach yourself from everything you had, which, it's at the time probably isn't as hard for people as it is now to detach from. So imagine if you would have, like you at that age, were to try to do that now. Do you feel like that would be so many more complications, or because you've seen how it is in today's world? And
it's we're asking about cell phones, and I said we don't really have cell phones, most of us. I might have had an iPhone for like a year before I entered. I think it had been out for maybe a couple of years before that, but I did have a smartphone. And since I've been back, I've had to have one just for communication.
It's pretty bizarre,
and I've tried my best to like stay, as minimal with the social media as possible. But I can see now the addictive factor of it is so prevalent, and so it's given me a greater insight, I think, to if a young person is feeling called to that way of life and is taking steps towards entering into it today, I find that very admirable. Because it just seems like so miraculous to me that someone could feel called to that and be able to detach themselves from everything in the world, because it's just everywhere. There's an addictive element to everything.
It's heavy. It's a heavy thing. Really I know some people can't. They wake up, turn off their alarm, and they're just sucked in to just keep on the screen versus get some sunlight.
Yeah.
Go outside.
There's so much.
Get some air. Right? Open your window or something, right? And it's imagine when businesses are ran nowadays, like without internet, walk-in traffic for us was having that door open, maybe a billboard, a guy in the corner with a sign, a big tattoo flag, and now our walk-in traffic is through the internet. I guess everyone's so plugged in and connected. When the time you went in, it wasn't as where it's evolved as where it is now.
Industry inks have been around for a while, and recently they expanded their pigment range. Everything from your primary colors, opaque grays, brand new anime skin tone, bright neon fluorescent tones, gray wash set, and black lining ink. If you haven't yet tried out this high quality pigment, head on over to industryinks.com, and with your order you can take advantage of a special promo code using OUTLOUD for an exclusive discount. Try out their new range for yourself, and thanks again for the partnered sponsorship.
When you came out, and I'm sure a lot of things were just, they hit you left and right, like overwhelming, right? Where you just, because I know you probably wanted to close off into the room and not come out. I want my solitude. I remember you mentioned it about the noises. And I wanted to hear you clearly, but you thought I was lowering the TV because I was like, oh, I better turn this off. It's like, it wasn't that. I'm deaf in one ear. So
it was funny. I was in here and you were turning off the TV.
I was turning it down while you said that, and I'm like, wait, no, I really want to hear this out.
Yeah, that's because we don't have TV in the monastery.
Right.
Like people ask us like if they can send us movies, like a movie of some kind, or they used to when, I don't know, I guess all movies are orderable out through the don't know, through your TV now. I don't know. I'm so
we don't have Blockbuster anymore.
I'm technologically like inept. I don't.
Redbox is gone.
Yeah. See, today I was clearing out my room of all these old DVDs because I'm like, I probably don't have any machines that I can play these on.
That now.
Yeah.
That's probably nostalgia. You know, it's vintage. Yeah.
Right. Well, there were movies that I have no interest in anymore, and I don't think anybody's ever gonna have any device.
The Notebook was hot back then.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Dear John, or something. Yeah.
The monastic life is another way of calling it. It's a life of silence and prayer and solitude to some extent. Although I find it interesting that you mentioned how everyone is plugged in and connected. I think that the notion of being connected, you can see that from two different angles.
Yes.
You can either say, everyone is like a single click away. Everything is instantly at your fingertips. You know, you can get whatever you want delivered to your doorstep. Like if not tonight, tomorrow night.
Yeah. That's probably bizarre to you. You're like,
that wasn't the case.
I think you were getting stir crazy or something. You then went into trying to get like a little part-time to kind of just hold you.
Right.
Was it for like I don't want to say sanity, because I don't know what went on, what drove you to want to get a part. Because I even asked you but I think you went in with a different perspective. I guess in the monastery you were doing a lot of different jobs, right? You were there's the farming, and there's also you mentioned you were in the kitchen, right? Mm-hmm. So you're working as like with baking, and that was like your thing, right? And then there's the farming, but I'm talking about like farming, right? Like you were harvesting, like
big garden and
gardens.
Farm animals. Taking care of just basically farm life, and then all the chores that go into having a big house and a big community of sisters to take care of.
Is that what kind of, when you saw this place and you're kind of like, oh, I would love to work in the baking?
Maybe, kind of. And it was just a good environment. I had a good experience in that kind of the place where the bakery was. What got me interested in taking on a little part-time job while I'm here was the fact that even though now the internet was like at my fingertips, which it hasn't been for many years, and I could have whatever I wanted, or I could explore whatever I wanted on the internet at any time, I was feeling more disconnected because there wasn't as much personal interaction as I had in the monastery, because we weren't on our computers or with our faces in our phones all day. We had to actually engage with each other and interact with another human being right in front of you.
Human interaction.
Yeah, all day, day in and day out. And that's what I was accustomed to. Although there's a limit to that in monastic life. Like I said, it's a life of prayer and silence. So you talk, but only when necessary. And it's often necessary. You need to communicate things for the work that you're doing around the house, around the farm. We talk often, and we joke often, and laugh often, and we love and have a great time together. But we're also aware that we're there for the purpose of serving and for praying. And so we respect the silence. Whenever we can have silence, we do respect that as much as possible. And so, but at the same time, we're there together. There's kind of this idea of being alone with God in the monastic life, in the consecrated life. When you're giving your life fully to Him in prayer, you're alone with Him, but then you're also alone with Him together. Right. Because we're all living this life with a common goal, which is the glory of God and the salvation of souls. And so you're striving for the perfection of charity, the perfection of love, and the perfection of service towards one another as much as possible. And so you're endeavoring to live a kind of a harmonious life together, to really seek the face of Christ in the person who's right in front of you as much as possible. And for the most part, we fail because we're fallen human beings. Right. But that's the hope, and that's what we're pursuing. And little by little, we're moving forward together.
Making the time count, though, also. That's what... So you're going in there from very personal, the silence, and you come out here, you get into this part-time where now in a common setting, there's a lot of small talk. There's a lot of small interactions, especially if you have like customers or traffic, right? The traffic coming into whatever establishment it is. A bakery, you're interacting with customers, whether it's how's your day going, right? A lot of that's not common.
Yes. Yeah.
Because everybody, right? So now you have to transition into this whole, the small talk is very hard. I remember you're saying that was a challenge, right?
Yes.
And then all of our transaction systems and the technology that in itself is different. So I think one of the funny things you told me was you didn't know what a QR code was. That was something where you're like, how do I scan it? What do I do? And I'm like, wow, what a lens though, to think from 2011 to now. And that's where I'm like, if we all just stopped,
right?
And let's just remember.
I knew what a QR code was, and I knew what, like, if I saw it, I knew what it was. But I had to be shown just a couple months ago, like how it actually use my phone to utilize that. I didn't know how to. I'd never did it before.
Unlock its secrets. So I think it's like if we all sat and just reminisce on that time frame, right, of just like how easy things were to how. I mean, a lot has happened also that I'm not sure if you were exposed to some of the things as far as what kind of news goes in and out of the monastery. When you guys gather together and praying for the world, I'm sure you'd want to get into not specifics, but some real problems that are happening, right? Whether it's the political, the wars, the unfortunate events or tragic events with culture or the generations, to also the conflict that we see today that has just escalated to a crazy, turnout. But how would you guys get word as far as like what's happening out today? Like, let's beware.
We have, again, most of us don't have access to the not regular access to the internet, or we can't, just Google anything at any time. There are specific sisters who are designated to go through the daily headlines and find out what's going on. They just the essentials. Like,
I got you.
Most of the time they'll read the headlines and maybe a few of the opening sentences, or they'll skim through an article if they think it's important enough. And then they'll pass that on to the rest of the community on a daily or every other daily. Like these are the things, these are the headlines, just so you can know the basics, and often you get enough from just a sentence or two. You don't need to know all the details of everything in order for it to really enter deeply into your heart and for it to affect,
to resonate.
To resonate with you. And then you're able to take it to the Lord in prayer and say, like, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on out there, Lord, like, can you please help us out? And you're not necessarily, when you're going to pray to the Lord like that, you're not expecting a tangible like answer. You're not going to pray for, this person to do this or that and then expect that it's going to happen the next day. But your hope is that your understanding, your trust is in the fact that God is everywhere and sees everything and is all powerful and able to do anything. He's able to fix anything at the drop of a hat. He could less than snap his fingers. He could just, at the movement of his will, change anything. And yet he allows things to be as they are. Your trust is that as bad as things are getting and seem to be going downhill very quickly, more and more, your trust and your hope in living this life of faith and dedicating yourself to this, what you believe to be true, your hope is that everything can be turned for the good. All the bad, if we receive it with resignation and with gratitude, and with a hope in a God who is good and beauty and truth, and love, a God who is love, that he's going to use even the bad things that are happening right now for the good in the end. As you grow in the life of faith, you just are able to receive more deeply into your heart all the pain and the darkness that you hear of, that's going on in the world and in individual people's lives. And you just take it and you present it to the Lord and say, Lord, look, there's this big mess that we've gotten ourselves into, and we're totally like not capable of fixing it ourselves. Right. But we trust that you're good. And so we're just going to keep moving forward, and please just remain with us. And we know that you will. And we're just here asking you to have mercy on the world. And we know that you will, and you're good. And we just trust. And we're here. You're here in the name of those who are not able to trust for whatever reason. There's many souls who are just not able to love you as you deserve to be loved. And that's all of us. None of us can love him as they deserve to be loved. But we want to. We desire to love you more. And so we're here offering the needs of the world to you. And yeah, so that's what we do. That's what we do with the news, with the headlines that we hear.
That's how prayer works, though. A lot of people they're not accustomed, or they're not understanding what does a prayer consist of. Mm-hmm. It's not just, it's really humbling yourself to that level. A few passages that say, well, I tried sending you a prayer or like a change or a sign, but you didn't allow it to, right? Or you don't allow it to in your heart. You don't allow it to really allow it to become. That instant gratification comes to a lot that it gets distorted of, I make this change. Like, I need this to change. I need this.
We think if we don't get what we want, then he didn't listen. He's not listening.
It's not an app. Yeah. It's not, Also, like, where you stand, unfortunately, it takes something drastic in their lives to something to happen for them to then try to open up to this faith, or to have faith, or once they were raised with church in the home, but it's like there's so many factors that can weigh in to have people kind of stray away from a faith or their religion or whatever their belief is, or now find it, and you can hear somebody say, like, my life has just changed. And I've heard it from multiple clients that say, without sounding like cliche, like, I found Jesus, I found God. And it's like, no, that they really in their heart opened up to it. That's what a prayer is, though. I feel like you have to really get on that level, not just how we just instantly want.
You're not capable of getting what you want. Like, what you want is like eternal happiness. Like, that's the deepest desire of the soul.
What we're all seeking that, right? And especially now when we're like up to our, like, the stress gets high, or frustration, or things come your way, like get blindsided by something, and then you're just like, why can't I just like, I need this happiness, I need this, and you're seeking that. Then I don't know what you call, like, the more older sisters,
call them elder sisters.
Yeah. So
we don't call them that, but
because I don't even realize, like,
we do call them the older sisters in the community.
Sisters? Okay. So, like, the older sisters that are in have probably seen a lot more. They've been, and that was a whole different time. Like, our parents, that generation to where it is now, where they are astonished on how quickly kids could pick up technology when they don't understand it still. And that's just how things are getting adapted to, right? So imagine the younger sisters have a lot more of this, the way things are modern time, and going into nun society, then they still have a little bit of that slang.
Oh, there's definitely, and even I was just going to say, for sure, like, we wouldn't even use that in the monastery right now. So I picked up a lot of things like that, just because it's just, we just have a very direct, not direct, but I don't know.
No, it's a different proper.
Yes.
I think you mentioned it to me. There's a library, because that's where you read a lot, right? Yeah. The literature, and you're learning in a very traditional manner. Where it's kind of,
everything is meant to orient your mind and your heart towards the heavenly life, towards the life of God, towards the life that we believe we're going to be living for all eternity after we die. It's really a preparation for the rest of eternity, and it's a beginning of that life already now. They call it it sometimes is referred to as like the heavenly life, because it's sort of a foretaste. It's meant to be a foretaste of life in heaven, although there's many elements of it that are not quite what you would call heavenly. Because as you were saying, there's a purification element of it when you're living with a group of dozens of other people. It's challenging enough just to live in a house of 3 or 4 or 10 people if they have a big family. But to live with more than that, we're all from different walks of life. We all have our different stories, and so we all have to really work to live together harmoniously in community, and that takes a lot. So
you guys all have to be in tune.
And we're not. We're human beings,
right.
and so we have to be constantly forgiving. I can see even the people who are the young women and young men who are what we say is that we have a vocation. If a person has a religious vocation, because everyone has a vocation, and that's from the Latin vocare, to call. So everyone's called to something. Everyone has a particular mission in this life. So those who are called to religious life have a religious vocation.
Purpose.
Yes. But I can see how the challenges now are greater than ever in transitioning from a secular life in the world, to life in religious community, because it's so drastically, it's radically different.
Right.
Your life has to shift from being very easily oriented towards your own gratification, towards very, very easy, instant gratification in the world. Your whole way of being kind of has to undergo this purification and this shift towards being oriented towards enduring difficult things willingly and joyfully for love, because that's what Christ, your spouse, your bridegroom, did. And a lover becomes kind of one. That's the purpose of a marriage, is so that you can be united to the one that you love and experience their life in some way and integrate your lives. The closer we get to our spouse, the more we like sympathize with them and can understand what they're going through and feel what they're feeling. And so the longer you spend in religious life, the more you start to,
you get attuned to it, and
you get attuned to it. And so it's really an embrace. It's a greater embracing of the cross, of his cross. And so that comes about by being more and more willing to take on difficult things and to endure with love and joy.
Like the challenges you faced while getting into this, right? The challenges you would have faced would be a lot more, and I guess just from what people are like plugged into, right? Like the things that are like, if you have your routine and then you decide to not cold turkey cut, but in a sense, didn't you say that you kind of did? Like you just like settle whatever debt you had or whatever the case, and then just kind of got rid of it and then just kind of went? When
I felt called to become a nun, that was it was very fast. It went basically within a week. Within a few days, I had been like on the hunt, trying to like find a husband, to all of a sudden, like my eyes were opened and I saw a light. That I hadn't seen before, and I felt very certainly attracted to that and started taking concrete steps to move in that direction. And so for me, it wasn't difficult. Like I started talking about the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And to me, the poverty aspect of that was attractive right from the beginning. Now, I never like really had great ambitions to like make a lot of money. I never wanted to be a millionaire. But I wanted to be like, a comfortable working class. I wanted to just be comfortable. And that's what I was going to pursue as a career person. But as soon as I saw the beauty of a life of poverty, of a life of like being detached from worldly possessions, and being detached from worldly possessions little by little, that brings about an interior poverty, an interior freedom, an interior detachment from all the things that I think that I want, that I think are good for me. You started to be detached from everything that you think is good for you, and to be more attached to whatever God thinks is good for you.
Kind of like surrender.
Yeah. Exactly. So it wasn't difficult for me to detach from possessions, from material things. I remember being like coming home from that pilgrimage and feeling like, I think I'm going to become a nun. I want to become a nun. I'm going to start moving towards this. And I told a coworker of mine at that time, like, I'm just like really attracted to poverty. And she was like, you want to be poor?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like it did not, there was nothing that she could understand. She didn't understand it at all.
I guess I was curious what everybody thought around you around that time, because they probably would like, hold on, let's take a second. You're probably,
you know. Yeah. And thankfully that was the experience of a lot of people. I mean, that was the reaction of a lot of people, although a lot of people were encouraging as well, because at that point I was surrounding myself with people of the faith who respected nuns, who respected religious life, and were like, yeah, that's really great. If you feel called to that, like, start going for it. We support you. Yeah. But if you're not someone who feels called to that, there is always going to be like a little bit of like
the friction.
Yeah, you kind of don't understand fully, and so and so, but a lot of people, while they were encouraging, they were like, "This is good." Now, like, take some time to really discern and like think. Like don't rush into anything.
Right.
Take some time, and that was helpful, because maybe if I hadn't been encouraged to take some time and really think and pray hard about it, I might have rushed into the first community that I felt attracted to.
Versus knowing where you're actually fit.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Especially like when people are seeking colleges, what college is going to be good for you? Or like a church.
Yeah.
Same thing with a church.
Yeah.
What church do you feel? A lot of people they don't have maybe the knowledge of where to begin to even go to church. And I think I asked you the other day too, it's like, imagine if somebody that's never been in any kind of teaching, or they've never sit in during mass, to just show up and they're in the middle of whether it's a celebration or what quarter it is, right? And they're just kind of lost.
Yeah.
It is open to anyone could go and pray with you, with the sisters and nuns, right? You guys have a gift shop. It's not like you're off the beaten path, like the homestead. It's
for
like
most, I think now for most communities, even if they're enclosed like ours, they will have at least some level of contact with secular people.
Yeah.
For example, a small what we call apostolate, which is just another way of saying like the work that we do. Small apostolate of having a gift shop, or running a guest house, or having their doors open so people can come and participate in the prayer, what we call liturgy. That's how it is at our house. People can come and pray with us, any hour of the day, almost, when we open in the morning till when we close certain hours at night. Most religious communities are like that. They'll have some level of contact.
Right. What have you learned through, like, what lessons have you learned through the solitude and the silence, like, while practicing that?
Yes.
And so I guess compare and contrast to being out here now.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that attracts a lot of people to monastic life, to religious life, is the opportunity that it affords, because your day is scheduled out, like it's regimented out. You have very specific things that you do.
Right. So you could even like
you wake up.
Talk about like the different like tasks being there. Like how is it like like throughout the day, like the daily routines, right? Yeah.
This will be different. This will look different in all different communities. But for ours specifically, this particular element is very rare, but there are a few communities around the world who do this. We wake up a little bit before midnight every night, and so that we're able to be in the church by midnight, and then we pray for about 35 minutes. It's what we call the divine office, or liturgy of the hours is another name for it. The prayer of the church, and it's kind of considered like an extension of the holy sacrifice of the Mass. It's a chanted type of prayer, and you're chanting text from Scripture. And the idea is that, Christ said in Scripture, wherever two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. And so you're gathering together to pray, and we do this 7 times a day. The first time is at midnight, to pray together, and in praying together, we who have been baptized into the body of Christ, we're kind of providing Christ a voice to pray. So we're praying we're kind of his voice.
Right.
I don't know if that
makes
sense. It's hard to describe.
Right.
But
well, it's like the whole saying of, you know, doing his work through your hands kind of thing, but now through your voice.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it's another name for it, for the divine office, the Liturgy of the Hours. It's also called the work of God. Mm-hmm. That's what it's called in the Rule of Saint Benedict. The work of God, the Opus Dei in Latin.
Is it in Latin when you guys?
Often it is.
Oh,
we do
cool.
it about halfway in Latin and halfway in English. Some communities do it in one or the other, or whatever country you are, the vernacular. They'll do it in Spanish or in French or whatever, wherever you are. But for ours, it's sometimes is in Latin and sometimes in English. And that's because Latin is the language of the church, and it's what all the ancient documents were written in. And it's a we call it a sacred language because it's one of the three languages that was written. Jesus Christ, King of the Jews, on our Lord's cross, along with Hebrew and Greek. And so there's a sanctity, there's a holiness to this language, and so we preserve that by, even though it's technically a quote unquote dead language, like there's nowhere in the world that speaks that. I've heard
people say,
although there are like movements and communities of young people who are like starting to revive Latin, and I know there are people who can speak it fluently, and so it's really amazing because it's like it's so much more clear a language, and
it's like a native. It's like a native thing, right? Yeah. While you're there in silence, you guys start the prayer, right?
Yes,
and then so our
day
starts at midnight.
Starts at midnight, and so we just wake up and we don't have any other conversation except to go and pray for more or less an hour, and then we go back to bed and then wake up in the morning around between 5 and 5:30. Then just have a little bit of breakfast, and then we go back to the chapel to pray again, the same type of thing, the divine office. And then after that, we have about an hour of what's called Lectio Divina. That's divine reading. And so you're reading Holy Scripture or ancient writings of ancient church fathers who were explaining Scripture.
As a class, or does everybody just kind of...
Individually, in silence. Or you can, if you're off on your own somewhere, if you want to read out loud or just kind of whisper things out loud, you're free to do that, because sometimes people are able to connect with the Scriptures a little bit more by kind of reading it out loud. And a lot of us do that, and it helps to kind of ingrain it in your brain and in your body, and then and oftentimes Lectio Divina, you're just reading one line over and over again, and just meditating on that and applying it to how it applies to your life, and just asking kind of in a prayerful conversation with God, how do you want me to understand this, and how can I apply it to my day-to-day life. And that's what that is for about an hour. So you're just really in a meditative way praying with Scripture or ancient writings. And then after that, there's the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. And then there's a kind of a community gathering where certain announcements and things happen. And we say certain other prayers for prayers for the dead.
Right.
For us, there's a way for people to contact us and send prayer requests. Most communities receive lots of prayer requests every day because people know that these nuns are in there, and that's what they're there for, to pray for us. And so we have this stuff, and so we get a lot of prayer requests.
After that, does everybody kind of go to their
that's
farming, or
mostly that's about halfway through the morning, and then there's a period of work for the latter part of the morning, and everyone goes and does their duties wherever that is, taking care of farm animals, gardening, doing laundry, chores.
Before you went in, did you know how to do any of that?
No, none of that. None of that at all. In your first few years, you kind of do all the different tasks. You have different assignments pretty much every day. And little by little, you learn different skills, and the people who are in charge of assigning the tasks they can see, what you're good at and what you're not so inclined to do. And you kind of find your way and find the thing that you excel
everybody
in.
rotates in a sense, or you can get into another.
Yeah, it can sometimes you find what you're good at, and then you can stick with that job for many years. Sometimes all of a sudden your job can change after many years, and some people just, they just help out in various different jobs or many different jobs all the time, and they don't have one specific thing that they do, but they're maybe just a jack of all trades and can do a lot of different things. But yeah, by little by little, you kind of figure out, where you fit, how you can, and it's meant to be like, you as a human person are meant to like flourish in religious life and find the way that you can best serve and the best way that you can glorify God with your life. And so your community helps you to find that and to figure that out and like encourages you to like learn new skills, or, maybe the Lord didn't make you with that intention to do that kind of work, but this is what you're good at, or, you're able to help in all these little different ways. And so that you're encouraged and you're supported by your community in so many different ways. And so it's a beautiful way of living and working together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool because everybody has to be like on the same page of,
or at least you have to be very patient and forgiving.
Sure.
and willing to see the good, to seek the good in another person. Yeah. Because often we make mistakes and we mess up all the time, and we kind of the religious life is off. It's described sometimes, at least from within, as like a rock tumbler.
Sure.
So where you have maybe have all these jagged rocks that you just put into this thing, and you start tumbling it, and after a little while they start to become smoother, and then after a long time they become very shiny and beautiful, and they're gems.
They're gems, yeah.
And sometimes that takes a long time.
Everything.
Most of the time it's
molding,
our whole life.
Clay, sculptures, all that takes time, patience. As one needs to be with their own life and their own selves. You're eating organic as it gets, right?
As much as possible, yes.
So it's pretty healthy living, also farming and harvesting and everything that goes on the plate, everything that's being served.
As much as possible, yes. Yeah. We can't grow everything, and certainly like proteins and things, like we do have to shop for some groceries. And often people give us donations of things that are not necessarily organic.
Sure.
And we take them with gratitude and we enjoy them, I had a part-time job just before I entered, and I was making $10 an hour, and that was more than minimum wage. That was more than minimum wage.
Been gone for a while.
Yeah.
I think we compared it to like being like deployed, or
I'm still having to like pace myself. Like, just things are shocking.
That does affect the monastery in a sense. Cost of living increases. Obviously, you guys have.
Yeah.
Because I know you probably didn't handle the finances and stuff, but I'm sure it has to do, right? Like, that's where donations come into play, and you're the gift shop. And
definitely.
did you ever sell anything to like was there any like local farmers markets or anything where you guys would have not
like that? There is a specific without being
keeping it vague.
Yeah,
and keeping it like
vague.
An example.
Usually within every religious community, there is one kind of major enterprise that they undertake in order to sustain themselves financially. So we do have that. But now seeing the price of things, like not having been involved in finances at all while I was there, I'm just in awe of the fact that
how it's been so long running, right?
Yeah, like somehow by the grace of God, I think, the generosity of people must be helping us get by. I don't know how. Things are so expensive here that it's really miraculous that God in his goodness allows us to live this way of life.
Yeah.
And to not have to go out for the most part and take on jobs.
Right, to have that kind of that obligation or that extra task.
Because it's really,
on so much.
It's a full-time job to live at a monastery. It's full-time. Like any stay-at-home mom would testify.
Yeah.
Like, that's a full-time job, taking care of the house and children. And it
They
may
can
not
agree.
be, it may not be successful in the way that quote unquote the world society views it, but she's working like she doesn't get a lunch hour really. Yeah. She's not working a 9 to 5. She's working like a 3 a.m. sometimes to a 9 p.m. and than waking up at midnight.
Running on like 4 hours of sleep.
Or less sometimes.
Or less, or no. Yeah.
And so that's what it is. So our life is really full. It's balanced because there is so much time for prayer, and there is time allotted for solitude, but you are also in the presence of others most of the day. So it's really balanced, but it's a full-time thing. So we wouldn't, in order to be faithful, to maintain our fidelity to our life of prayer and intercession for the needs of the world, we wouldn't be able to take on jobs outside. And so it's a great blessing that somehow we're able to live this life. Somehow the finances are there, right. And this is how it's been from ancient times, because this way of life has been for hundreds of years, over 1,000 years. And somehow people's generosity is what traditionally has sustained communities like mine. And so
it's quite the team in society, in the world. Working a part-time, now you're the one that needs to learn a lot of things where you're like, wait a minute, it must be so crazy how, and then you guys will live in a certain way where it's like a team, but you might still have somebody that might be slower than everybody else, whether gatherers or picking up on things. I guess it all has its own difficulty, because in a job setting, as a new hire, a new employee, you have to now keep up the way the system works, almost learning a whole different training.
When you're in a community setting for a long time, it's a team and it's a family, and everyone has their role to play. If one person is missing, there's a part
like you feel it. There's something absent. There's something. You
feel it missing. And the same coming into a new setting, a new environment, and being the new person at a job. You don't know the community there. You don't know the way things work,
right.
And you don't necessarily have like a fixed place yet. And so it takes time to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so it's been a little interesting with my kind of part-time job since I've been here, because I know, and my employers know, that it's a very part-time kind of seasonal job for me. And so I try to support in little ways, but it's not like I can't, like, there's not enough time for me to really like find, the way.
By the time, the time it takes for you to be like back, like on the track of things.
Right. Because I'm going to be going back to my community pretty soon.
Right.
God willing, if everything works out.
You had this opportunity also to almost decide if you were going to do whether you're going to do work in a community out here, or if you're going to go back to the monastery, right? And you obviously had this in mind that you were going to go back, right?
Yes, yeah. It was but some of my health issues, we weren't sure whether I was going to be able to go back to the community with them, but it became very clear pretty soon after I left that would be. I just needed
a possibility for sure.
And I realized, I decided. I don't really have questions about that.
You're like, I'm going back.
not to say like that,
sure.
Just the experience of like the world.
The world scared you enough.
Yeah, that's how people can kind of see it, and
right.
I think it can be easy to phrase it that way. But it's not so much.
No, I think your heart was already set though.
Yeah,
like you're living that.
It's kind of like if you're
you're accustomed to it, you're used to, you're already like,
sort of like if you're in a marriage for like 10 years, and then maybe it's not the greatest example, but for me, like, the notion of getting married, like that's a once and for all thing.
Right.
If you're in a committed relationship and you have children who are dependent on you, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you have to separate yourself from that for a time. It's just, that was your whole world, right. and kind of your whole world is kind of turned upside down in a way, and so you do your best to adapt to where you are and to bloom where you're planted. You're taken out of that comfort.
You're taken out of the
but there's something within you that knows, like, that's my life, and I have obligations there, and that's where my heart is.
Now you're homesick, because I'm sure you can get, because I know we kind of touched on that when you're, because people need to face and understand, if you put yourselves in those kind of through your lens. There are things that it takes a strong person to have missed out on events, holidays, or certain family situations that you wish normally people would be like gathered for or to have been a part of. And obviously you are married to this with like devotion and the vocation. Because I asked you, not necessarily as a regret, but how tough it was to face it. And I know you said, you know, what you told me was what's promised to you, what you're doing in the bigger picture above what's really happening. You're actually doing something greater above it, in a sense where not necessarily undermining what a situation, like whether it's a holiday and you weren't able to attend or whatever. Through prayer, you're almost paving this road, like a heavy task. It's crazy, right? So I mean, I'm sure being out here now, because you were once home, I don't know if you ever faced that homesick feeling, because you had I'm just what I would do, right? You have to really hunker down and have that headstrong. But the feeling of, you know, missing home.
Like, so you're meaning when I was in the monastery, like missing home, like being with my biological family.
Exactly.
Like, right.
And now you're coming back where the roles, it's switched. And now you're missing that.
Yes.
Right? Is that what you kind of face now with the comparison?
That's what most people don't understand. So, yes. So one thing, just for clarification, sure. We wouldn't go home for holidays or things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
People
So you're making reference to like when my, you know, for the last decade I haven't been home for Christmas, and I wasn't there when my nieces were born, or you know,
or everything in between.
Everything in between, yeah.
Not just Christmas, and you got birthdays, holidays. Right.
There's definitely like a sacrificial element to that. Like that's something that you know is going to be the case when you decide to enter into this way of life. You know that there's going to be some pain of separation from your family and your friends and everyone and everything that you loved, all the good things in the world and life and society, because there are so many good things, and you make a decision willingly to give up even those things that you really loved.
Because again, you're not held there against your will. You are free.
You're free. Yeah.
But that's how strong you have this your grounds, right?
Yes. There's something it's a recognition that there's something greater. There's a greater joy and a greater mission that you've been called to, that you've been created for, than anything that you can find in the world. If you've been called to that way of life. Not everyone has been created for that. And there are lots of people who in their very good will try to live that way of life and discern that it's not for them, and return to life in the world and stay permanently back in the world and go on to live, you know, good lives and have good families, or, you know, good careers or whatever. But if that is what you've been created to do, it's not an easy thing. It's a difficult thing. It's a voluntary sacrifice of all that you knew and loved and enjoyed in the world, for something that you believe to be worthy.
So now your house is shifted within this little bit of a time frame, and then you're just kind of missing that home now, because that's been you're used to this.
Yeah. So after a while, you become like, as you adapt more and more to that way of life, that becomes your way of life, and that becomes little by little your home. And that's where you have.
Like, I'm sure you feel like you're needed. Like you said, someone's missing.
Yeah.
It takes how many people? Did you say it takes how many sisters or like actual nuns to fill your position?
Oh yeah, I mean,
you're like, hey, this is your time to like really show off. It's like, it takes about 3 sisters. No, I'm kidding.
We all have, like, again, if you've been there for a long time, then you might find yourself taking on a good amount of responsibility in certain areas.
And so like hands are stretched everywhere.
And with anything like here in your shop, you know, if you were to, like, something were to happen to you and tomorrow, like, would there be anyone who has all the stuff that you have in your brain as far as running this shop, as far as your clientele, who to reach out to get everything in order if you weren't here all of a sudden to do it? Especially for women, we have this certain need to feel needed. Sure. And so it's a difficult thing.
Even this new.
So, I mean, so I don't know if that's going to resonate well with some people, but for me as a woman, this is something that I recognized within myself, is that the the certain inclination to take care of people, to be a wife and a mother that I once had.
The nurturing aspect, and also like the caring.
Yeah. So it's a difficult thing to have to separate yourself from your family. Right. They really become the community becomes your family, and to know that you're not going to be there, but you have to have a certain amount of trust,
right?
That God is allowing this to happen for a reason, and that they were okay before I got there, and they're going to be okay without me there. Yeah. They're going to survive, and the Lord's going to take care of them, and God willing, I'll go back.
So like there are people that don't understand that there is a process, and there are rules within the community, as there are in many different. I guess we can compare it to industries, or a workplace can have their own policies, right? If you will, the monastery has its own policies. So going back, I remember you mentioned to me there is like a step, like a process for it. Mm-hmm. So you're just kind of like, now you have to be patient about that also, right? Taking a new oath, or is it like kind of starting from? Sure.
Yes. Because I wasn't sure, again, because of the medical things, I wasn't sure if or when I would be going back. Now that I am sure that I will be going back, there is a process to like kind of reintegrating back into the community.
Yeah.
Until the time comes when I would make a final vow, what we call perpetual vow, or a solemn vow, to remain there for the rest of my life. Because I hadn't done that before. There are certain steps, and for a certain number of years, you take certain sort of what's considered a temporary vow,
right,
for only a few years at a time, or a 1 year at a time, so that little by little you're kind of building up the certainty that you want to make this final commitment, and be here for the rest of your life. And so I haven't made that final commitment yet, and so. In order to get to a place where I'm able to actually make that vow, it takes some reintegrating back into the community. So
and that's what's been like. But you're like going through that process and whatnot. Yeah. So, and at the position where you were, the part-time,
from time to time, and especially with coworkers who I know are of the same mindset, the same, because
they know
belief.
you're a nun.
Yeah,
right? That's got to be intense to be like, wait, what? Like, I'm sure it kind of raises that. What we were talking about, when you see that in society, your presence is like a very impactful, right? So when word got around, did they all kind of like, whoa?
It's a kind of different thing, because even when people are, have the same core fundamental beliefs, still to be a nun, that's a different, it's a different thing. Yeah. So most people have questions, or things that they're curious about, and so it's interesting. Like I really love sharing about the life, although I don't feel like I really have a good way of articulating all the beauty and richness of the way of life that I've been so blessed to live.
Right.
But I definitely love sharing about it, and it doesn't necessarily like it almost never is a case that I'm like trying to make it seem attractive. Like it's attractive to me.
Yeah. But I mean, this is your own experiences. I mentioned before that this was your journey, and here forward, but it's like the insight of what it's walking through your in your footsteps through this journey, how you've charted into this life that is, for someone to hear that, like at a part-time job now that I'm sure raised so many questions and but then were you ever dealing with the traffic, like the traffic of the facility? Were you ever out?
Sometimes,
or were you just behind a counter kind of thing?
Mostly just behind a counter. Every once in a while, there's an opportunity to share, but things move so fast that never really like in depth for me. And I don't know. I find it hard. Like I'm not a really good conversationalist.
Which is crazy because we've been talking for 2 hours.
That's because you're good at asking questions, but I'm not good at asking questions.
Is this the longest you've had as far as conversations since you've been
Probably.
like a very consistent conversation?
Mostly,
has it been?
yeah, and that's
Sure.
because you're good. Like I recognize this since I was little. Like I'm not. I'm not good at asking questions or like.
Because last time I've seen you, you said you were what, like 19 to 20. You went in at. You were how old? You said 20, or you were you found you were like more into faith around 19, right? And then you chose to take this.
Yeah.
But I just remembered from time to time when I would see it, and then I just, I knew what you were doing. I just didn't. I don't think I'm ever going to see her.
Right.
Again.
Yeah. We didn't have any conversations.
So that's why I kind of when you came in and we started talking, I wouldn't have brought any of this up.
Like I said, you have some contact with people. But most of our contact is just with each other. Most of our conversation is just among the sisters. You live with an awareness that everyone's there for the same purpose, and that's to live a life for God and like pursuing a life of holiness. And so we even talk about mundane things, random things like weird things that the chickens did in the coop today, or what's going on in the garden, or the laundry. It's just random boring farm stuff, I guess, to most people.
It keeps it entertaining,
right? But it's not like we're not like sitting there in deep conversation about.
It's a different way to carry out.
But because you live with an awareness that everyone's there out of love of God, that just becomes the world that you live in. And so when most of the people that you encounter from day to day, when that changes, perhaps it's the case that like 99% of the people that I encounter on a day-to-day basis, like have a deep faith and love of God and of Jesus, like I do. But things move so fast. We're not accustomed to
taking a moment.
Yeah, things just move so quickly, and so the conversations don't often afford the opportunity to.
I wasn't sure if anybody ever, or I guess perhaps a coworker, since I'm assuming you'd probably see them more than any kind of traffic, to just say something and then just kind of.
I think it's more of like, rather than having a conversation, it's more like of the way that you approach someone, or like really looking someone in the eye and like making them realize, like not making them, but for a person to realize
locked in.
to just like see your genuineness. Or I've learned recently that the word is intentionality. Is that the word, that the way people put it these days? Like that you're being intentional in the way you're engaging someone. You're like an actual person to me. Like you're not just another transaction, or you're not just another, Facebook friend. I don't have Facebook, but like.
But back then also Facebook was just for college kids, right?
Right. Yeah.
You remember that, right?
Yeah. It was.
And you came out and it's like we have war on social media.
Exactly. Yeah. So like to be aware, now I'm aware that like people are in this world of war on social media all day. Like as soon as they leave here, they might just go back into their phone. Yeah. And so for this like 30 seconds that I'm talking to you, like just know that like I'm really genuinely thankful that like I'm having I'm encountering you right now, and you, because
that's also like the undivided attention is kind of
because
gone.
The thing is, the notion is you become, in the way of life that I've had the gift of living, you become more and more aware that every person is undergoing some trial.
Right.
It's that's the whole human experience, is that we're on a journey, and we're on our way to our ultimate to the ultimate goal, which I believe to be is a life of eternity with God. That's what I believe. Everyone's destined to something, and so the awareness that everyone is walking around carrying some weight. It makes you more inclined to like want to relieve that weight in even the smallest way, even if it's just through a smile. Most of the time, all I have to offer them as far as like sharing my faith is like smiling at them and really like genuinely, thanking them for being like here, in this moment.
Well, even if like you said, walking around with weight, and even if it's the lightest of weight, walk around some miles in your life with that weight, eventually it's going to get very heavy.
Yes.
You're going to get tired out. I guess that's just in comparison to a lot of things. It could be, I remember you mentioned one of the times you were here that you couldn't believe how many people were suffering with a lot of some things that are now highlighted, like the mental stress, the anxiety, the depression, the mental health issues.
Yes.
And you were kind of in disbelief of just how things are.
Yeah.
And not necessarily with a side of like the technology, but just the things that are in our forefront of the common issue with a lot of people. You're surrounding yourself with a lot of the, whether it's the coworkers are walking of the traffic, and I'm sure now you can see that it is a fast treadmill, and everyone's on this, and you're the only one that's like in this very. It's pretty bizarre. Like you're in a time capsule, right? So it's like we just thawed you out, right? Yeah. You were on ice.
I do. Yeah, I have felt kind of like an alien. I don't. For sure, I'm not like thinking of myself as like some higher or superior experience.
We brought you through a time machine. Yeah. Yeah, we just brought you into the future. And
I kind of am like a little alien here, not really knowing how to conduct myself. But it's been interesting. It's been very interesting.
It's pretty fascinating. You kind of feel that way though. That's like, I feel like an alien. It's just there's so much that has happened fast within that time span.
Yeah.
And I feel like going back, ultimately you can, I don't know if you'd be able to share, I guess, your experiences or what you see, or internally solemnly pray over all the things you've seen. Would you add things like that to your prayer and just being,
well, in certainly, I mean, the experience of having come and like seeing the way the world has changed, that will certainly go back with me to my life of prayer. And I definitely, I think, will take more seriously the life that I've been called to, the gift that I've been given to live such a beautiful life, and to give myself in the service of others. I'll take it more seriously because we believe that a life of kind of self-renunciation, a life of focusing more on others and less on yourself is effective, that it draws down graces for other people. I don't know if that makes sense, but like the more you can consciously focus on the good of others and the needs of others, the more others, benefit from that, and the more you benefit from that. I've found that the more you can only really people are like searching for answers and and happiness and satisfaction, and they're really we are really searching for like to find ourselves and to figure out, well, what is it that I'm missing? Like, what is it that I really
what's the
want?
Answer?
Yeah, what's the answer?
Exactly.
But you can only, and I this isn't from me. This is a wise Pope. St. John Paul. We most people remember John Paul. We grew up with him.
Yeah.
He said a person only really finds oneself, discovers oneself by making a complete and sincere gift of himself or herself. The only real peace, I think, comes from going out of yourself, getting out of your head, and like doing good for others and working towards a noble end.
It's hard. You can't do that without also having that toxicity, that toxic weight, without priming, cleansing.
Yeah, you have to make an effort. You have to make an effort to
make it a pact. Make it for sure like a, before you because I feel like that, because when we say what's the answer, or it's not to an equation, it's to people want a solution, right? So they're facing problems, or they're, whether financial or the household, or being blindsided by multiple things like we were talking about. It's like they take that as an equation and they want the solution to that, and then they see something like as influence through a screen or whatever they're feeding their their mind, right? It's hard for you to turn around and filter that and try to project positivity or project the grace, like you mentioned, to put into in Liam's terms. You have to also be right, at peace with yourself, which is, it kind of reminds me when you mentioned about having those conversations with yourself. And that already, little did you know, that started I guess you want to put it the bubble around you to be okay, start cleansing and turn around, and you're able to just give it out with authenticity. So it's very authentic instead of it being a facade or what we hear today, someone that has dual intentions versus just a very pure, very a genuine, positive push, and to be that one ripple to create a wave, right? And that, I feel that's hard for some people to do that, but you can't take that as an equation and ask what's the answer, you can answer that yourself. You have to start, I feel you have to start there though, right?
Yeah, you have to make a personal decision to start searching for truth, I guess, and to recognize that truth exists, and that you were made, you were not just an accident. Your life isn't an accident, and
purpose, and like you said, destined.
People in the world and situations around you are affected by your presence, and you're here for a reason. Your life serves a purpose. Everyone's does. And so rather than just mindlessly going along with whatever society is telling you should do, you have to make a conscious decision to better yourself day by day. Sit down and ask yourself, what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? And start seeking out answers to that, and then start taking concrete steps to move towards the fulfillment of your purpose. That requires discipline, which most of us very much are lacking in, myself included.
We're all guilty.
We're all guilty.
Like you say, we're getting tested every day.
Yes, but that is, I think that's the mark of a mature human person.
Right.
And many of us, myself included, are just greatly lacking in maturity today, and the ability to step back and say, it's not all about me. There are people and things that are affected by decisions that I make, and I have a responsibility to
do your part.
To do my part, yeah.
That's what I can capture from that, because that's really well said, I feel.
So you have to be disciplined by the grace of God. Sometimes I come across little things on the internet now that I have access to it for a little while, and every once in a while there's a clip or short of something that says, now put your phone down and go do something beautiful for God or for someone else. And I'm so thankful that I came across that, because I'm okay, I know that is for me. That's for me right now.
That's your name on
right
it
now. But that's all of us. You have to make a decision to limit your time doing things that are doing nothing to move you forward in life.
Right.
We spend so much time, I think, just, what is it called? Death scrolling? Is that what you call it?
Sure. There's so many terms though. Yeah, sure.
Just
Death scrolling.
You have to make a conscious decision to put that down, turn that off, pick up a book, just go and ask whoever is next to you in your house how they're doing.
Yeah.
If you haven't done that today, just make a decision to spend time with another human person one-on-one. Make a decision to go and visit someone at their house. Decide today it's actually maybe a more human thing to do to call the person that I want to talk to, rather than send them
a text. Right.
Is that real? Is it really better to send them the text? And I'm guilty of sending texts all the time.
It's intimidating to get a phone call nowadays.
Yeah. Someone just, I think yesterday or the day before, they were, I forget what we were talking about, but they were genuinely convinced that they were doing that it was the better thing to do, that it would inconvenience someone, or someone would be very much more put out to receive a phone call rather than to receive like 20 text messages.
Right.
And they were genuinely convinced of that. And like that's where we are now, like on our, and so that's what I feel is part of why I know that I am called and desire to return to the way of life, is because it's for the sake of those who cannot recognize the goodness of detaching from all of our like technological addictions and all the different ways that we're addicted to our vices in life today. So in gratitude for recognizing that like there's more to life than living like it in your phone. Like if you didn't have your phone for one day, could you survive?
Right.
Or when you don't have your phone for one day, will you be able to survive?
There it is.
Therefore,
That's funny. So that's funny because it's so it's such a minimalistic thing. That's an extension of their lives.
Yeah.
You know, you can't. That's a hard one to swallow to say. Make it a day without your phone.
Yeah.
Some people right now.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Until I don't have my phone anymore.
Yeah, right. You're like, can't wait. Go back to Go back to Telegram and Morse code.
I don't know about necessarily. I wouldn't say that. Like we are. The advancement of technology is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it can be used for good.
Practicality.
Certainly
practical uses is the uses of the technology for like the positive.
Yeah, but it's when we abuse, and most of our use of it is abuse. That's the thing. So
a quick shout out to Helios Tattoo Supplies, one of the newest sponsors for the podcast. I'm proud to be a sponsored pro team member using their needles on the daily. Next time you're thinking about stocking up on supplies, head over to the website heliostattoos.com. Thanks again to Helios for sponsoring myself as an artist and sponsoring the pod.
I felt like this was an amazing opportunity to have someone that it's very rare that we were able to have a chance like that, to have a one-on-one with someone that can give you a reminder. You mentioned something that one of the times that, you know, you almost felt embarrassed or ashamed to even say some things because of whether it's opinion or like the judgment, which is that's kind of terrible.
Right, yeah.
It sucks.
That's the thing. That's based on my own insecurities, which I'm living
that underlines,
through.
Right.
I'm growing through. So I'm learning. That
underlines other things.
Because I shouldn't be. I have certain beliefs and I told
you that. I was like, you shouldn't be. I was like, you know what? Just go out there and live it, do it.
And it's not. I definitely, I mean, all of us are growing in our walk with the Lord, and of course growing in our trust of Him. And so I'm definitely still on the road to greater trust of God.
But I know you were just so used to also the silence and the personal.
Sure,
and
what I think what concerns me the most is for people to, because I don't feel like I'm good at expressing myself and even the fundamentals of my religious beliefs. Like I'm always just very conscious that people might think that like I'm judging them or condemning them in some way, or they don't believe what I believe, and it's definitely, that's not the case at all. Like our whole life, as religious, as nuns, is like, it's a life of love. It's a life of pursuing greater love, and that's to know that everyone was created by God, who is love. Because He is love, they were created in His love. Like everyone's loved by Him, and there's nothing anyone can do to make Him stop loving them.
Right.
They could decide not to love Him. We can decide not to love Him, but there's nothing that a person can do to make God stop loving them. And therefore, as a follower of Christ and of God, it's our calling and our duty to, as much as to the greatest extent possible, love all of God's children with His love. And so our life is loving and praying for everyone, even those who seem to be very far from agreeing with what we believe.
Absolutely.
We're praying for them and for everyone. So It's not, I'm always just concerned about making people feel like judged and
sure.
my intention, but hopefully
no,
people don't get
I
that
feel
impression.
like, yeah, no, I get it. If there was one thing, because I know you said I'm not one to give advice, but if someone were to come up to you the way you once went up to somebody, another sister, and asked information, now somebody were to come to you and from all things you've been through, experienced through life, in your own situation or your own personal experiences, what kind of things would you tell that person? And I know you hit so many key points which revolved around the find your purpose. What would you stand by? I'm curious.
I would stand by actually something that I just heard in passing the other night. I was just somewhere and I passed by a conversation about the afterlife, I think.
Oh. All right.
It's not where you thought this was going to go.
Oh, we're going that route. Well, now we're here. Keep going. I'm kidding.
All I heard was it's wiser to live your life as if God existed and then die and find out he didn't exist. It's wiser to do that than to live as if God didn't exist and then to die and find out that he does. And so...
That's heavy.
Yeah.
Oof.
Life's heavy.
Take that, huh?
So all I can say is, my life is completely revolved around a very specific belief. And I would be lying if I were to say, I didn't wish that everyone believed what I believe. I do wish that.
Yeah.
Because if you believe in something and you believe it to be true, then you have a responsibility to at least hope and pray that others will come to the same light that you feel you've come to.
Right.
And so, yeah, if I'm honest, I wish everyone did believe as I believed. But I think if nothing else, if you haven't asked yourself what's going to happen after you die, go home and or turn off this computer, this podcast, and as one famous psychologist says, sit on the end of your bed and ask yourself this question: what do I really believe is the truth? And if I don't believe there's any truth, is that true?
Yeah, that's amazing. This has been awesome. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to really kind of allowing you to open up this manner, and grateful for what you've done for us as far as through prayer. Like I mentioned, you are like a mother figure. So little do you know, behind the scenes, she's praying for us. So y'all be thankful, Genuinely, like, for giving time to come out. I hope you're able to inspire. That's the purpose. If anything, if you're able to catch anything from this, is mainly inspiration and just to see the mental toughness and resilience and the passion. I learned a lot. There's a lot of things I didn't know. That's why I was and I'm sure that's what that's what's going to be carried forward. So.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope it was at least entertaining, if nothing else.
No, this is great. With that said, this has been Tattooing Out Loud, Tattooing Nuns.
I'm not removing tattoos.
Yeah. Thank you again for our guest, Sister Mary. And for listeners making it this, throughout the whole segment, and to be able to really, hopefully after this, able to meditate, just take it all in, because this is like an eye opener, and it's a very grounded experience. Like, it grounds you to listen to a lot of things. Like,
and go visit a Catholic monastery.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like nuns, you don't like the church, just go.
There's a lot of beautiful things to see.
Go visit one. That's my advice.
There you go. You'll be spiritually moved right there.
I think you will.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll end it.
All right.